Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Oyster Bay Town Board meeting of Tuesday, September 12th. I'd like to ask you all to rise, please. Before we poll the board, I would like to ask you to all join me in a moment of silence in memory of those we lost 16 years ago during the September 11th attacks on our nation. Thank you. Our 9/11 Remembrance Ceremony at Tovey Beach was a very moving tribute to their memories. And our hearts go out to all of the families and survivors, especially those in the town of Oyster Bay. This evening's prayer will be led by Father Frank Nelson, pastor of Maria Regina Roman Catholic Church in Seaford, New York. Maria Regina Parish is a Roman Catholic community church located in the South Shore of the town of Oyster Bay and consisting of some 6,000 families. According to Father Frank, on any given night, you might find 15 people cooking in the parish kitchen to provide food for the INN, the Interfaith Nutritional Network, and a family faith session for over 1,800 children, perhaps choir practice or handbell choir, and the rosary being prayed at Our Lady's Grotto on Jerusalem Avenue, the liturgy committee meeting, and outreach volunteers providing food or advocacy or any number of ministries. So to lead us in the pledge, Father Frank, would you please step forward? To lead us in prayer, rather.
Good evening, everyone. Loving and gracious God, you are indeed the giver of all good gifts. We thank you this evening for all your blessings, especially in these beautiful summer months, in this beautiful place of Oyster Bay. We ask that you bless our residents abundantly. We continue to seek your wisdom, your guidance, your courage and strength. Be with us in our deliberations. Help us to be wise in the decisions we make for the good of those who have placed their trust and confidence in our leadership. Perhaps too often we live side by side, sharing our community, but taking each other for granted, living our lives, going through our days, seldom thinking of community, seldom stopping to think of the needs of our neighbors, caught up in living and providing for ourselves and our family. Neighbors are just there, just people, until disaster strikes, hardship comes, or weather rages. And then, suddenly and desperately, we need one another to help survive, to keep hope alive, to live. And so give us insight this evening to lead with integrity, that our decisions may reflect what is right and good. Keep us from short-sightedness and pettiness. Help us to make decisions that are for the good of all, and guard us from blind self-interest. Holy One, grant us the humility to always seek your will in all that we do. And may we say today, I will do something to build this town of Oyster Bay, making it stronger for all people who live in peace. Amen.
Amen. Our Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you, Father. Our Pledge of Allegiance will tonight be led by Lisa Ryan, President of the Blue Star Mothers, Moms of Military New York 12. She's a proud Army mom and a Hicksville resident. Lisa, would you please join us?
I salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now I'm proud to call Lisa up to the podium for a special Blue Star banner presentation. Please welcome Lisa and the members of her chapter in attendance with us this evening. The Blue Star Mothers of America are a national organization that provides support for mothers who have sons or daughters in active service in the United States Armed Forces. Lisa?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. My name is Lisa Ryan. I'm the president, as he stated. Stand with Nicole DePaula. She is one of our vice presidents. And Mary Ann Barcelona, who is our chapter secretary, also a town of Oyster Bay resident. Our son has separated from the United States Marine Corps. Nicole has two sons currently serving in the United States Air Force. One is getting ready to deploy to the flood zones. And my son is currently serving in the United States Army. He is currently serving in a land very, very far away with a not allowed to study. Our chapter started in December 2014. We started with 22 members. We now have over 74 families that are currently in our chapter. If you know a military family in your neighborhood and they have one of these banners in their window, please let them know that there's a Blue Star Mother chapter in their area. We're here. We meet the third Thursday of every month at the DFW in Hicksville. There's a chapter in Suffolk County if you know anybody in Suffolk County. Tonight we're presenting the town with two banners, one for each of the town halls, and a flag that can be hung.
We'll come down to accept that, and I'm also going to ask Councilwoman Rebecca Alessia, a very proud mom in her own right, to help by presenting this town citation to you with the help of all of our board members, our elected officials. Jim Stefanich is a Blue Star dad, also
Yes.
very proud.
Yes, he is. Thank you. 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 We're not gonna- I don't want to put this in front of us. Go right ahead. Oh, thank you so much. Thank you for your support. Thank you.
As I mentioned earlier, we had our 9/11 remembrance ceremony at Tobay Beach. It was a very moving tribute. Since the last time our board met, the town of Oyster Bay has dedicated a street in remembrance of FDNY firefighter Raymond Pfeiffer of Hicksville. I ask that you all join me in a moment of silence in memory of Ray and those first responders who have passed away and continue to battle 9/11 cancers and illnesses. Thank you. It's important to point out we also had a very special ceremony at Burns Park on the morning of 9/11. Many, many members of the community took part in that, as well as our firefighters and emergency responders, and we thank them all. Now, much has occurred in the past several weeks. We recognize Good Samaritans for saving the lives of a resident who almost drowned while boating on the Long Island Sound. We also joined with police and other community leaders in denouncing anti-Semitic graffiti in Syosset and announcing a Crime Stoppers reward. To help those impacted by the devastation left behind by Hurricane Harvey, we collected thousands of donations from residents, which are now on their way down south to help out the survivors of Harvey and now, obviously, the survivors of Irma. I want to thank our residents and Island Harvest for doing such a great job in helping to make a difference. Unfortunately, Hurricane Irma struck, and our fellow Americans in Florida, we are renewing our efforts and collecting donations for families in these areas, and we will keep the victims of those impacted by Hurricanes Harvey and Irma in our thoughts and prayers. On a more upbeat note, we launched free Wi-Fi service at Tobay Beach to the delight of many. We hosted the town's first ever waterfront festival and 32nd annual Bluefish tournament. That was this past Sunday. Thousands of residents enjoyed the events of the day, the live concerts, all of these delivered free to our residents. It was really a fun and special day, as well as a day of education and environmental protection. Our residents expressed much satisfaction with both. I remind our residents the town continues to offer free adoptions at our animal shelter throughout the month of September. Additionally, a free rabies vaccination clinic will be offered for dogs and cats and ferrets on September 16th. I also remind our residents that our traveling town hall tour continues this week, providing enhanced transparency, helping residents in their own neighborhoods with anything they might need help with in terms of Town of Oyster Bay services. And I remind residents that the town and Yes Community Counseling Center are hosting a free overdose prevention and Narcan training seminar on Wednesday, September 27th at Massapequa High School. And we would like the public to join us so that we can make a big impact in the combat of the heroin and the opioid crisis. Tonight, the town board welcomes corporate officials and 2 local franchises from the 7-Eleven Corporation here with us this evening. The town of Oyster Bay is proud to honor the community contributions and exemplary actions of 7-Eleven. Besides operating highly respected and popular franchises across the nation, the 7-Eleven Corporation is involved in numerous charitable endeavors that help people advance worthwhile causes and make our communities an overall better place to live. One shining example is the generous support as a luncheon sponsor of the 2017 Long Island Special Olympics Spring Games held at Bethpage High School, which featured more than 500 special needs athletes competing in various sporting competitions. This great program was made possible through dedicated volunteers and the extremely generous and community-minded support of sponsors like the 7-Eleven Corporation. But it doesn't end there, because our friends at 7-Eleven, as their outgoing community support, includes many programs and projects. Supplying food and beverages for many of the NYPD and FDNY funerals throughout the town of Oyster Bay. Sponsorship of the JDRF walks in both Nassau and Suffolk counties. The Soldier Rides program benefiting the Wounded Warrior Project. The Brian Moore Memorial Fund. And our own Town of Oyster Bay Movies by Moonlight series and the town's Fall Festival and Spring Festivals, to name just a few. The 7-Eleven Corporation leads the way with efforts that truly have made a positive impact in our communities. My town board colleagues and I salute the actions and recognize the remarkable contributions of 7-Eleven, which are particularly worthy of the town of Oyster Bay's highest commendation. On hand from 7-Eleven this evening are Sandy Bauer, 7-Eleven Market Manager, Nassau County, Thomas Maisano, 7-Eleven Development, Nassau County, Maureen Abdenor, 7-Eleven Community Relations Consultant, and Christian Tolani, 7-Eleven Multiple Store Franchisee in the town of Oyster Bay. We'd ask that you all step forward, and my colleague Tom Hand would like to present this citation to you. Let's give them all a hand. Would all our colleagues like to join us, our elected officials like to join us for a photo with them, the presentation? Girl Scouts are here? Yes? Good. Good. This evening, we're also pleased to welcome Girl Scout troop leaders and parents from Girl Scout Troop 104 in Oyster Bay, East Norwich. As part of the Cadet Troop's Silver Award project, the troop built a little free library and installed it at Theodore Roosevelt Beach in Oyster Bay. The little free library is a wooden box on a post filled with donated books that can be read and returned, and it's painted absolutely beautiful. If you haven't had a chance to see it yet, it really is special and done by the very artistically talented Girl Scouts. It's a great service to our local residents who can now enjoy reading a good book in the great outdoors. The Girl Scout Troop is headed up by Troop Leader Tina Giardi, who would like to say a few words about this exciting and innovative program. Tina? Please.
The Girl Scout Silver Award is the highest award a Girl Scout cadet can receive. The Silver Award gives you the chance to do big things and make the community a better place. As Girl Scouts, we are committed to do our very best with each step. We worked for many hours to try to perfect our projects. Little Free Library inspires a love of reading, builds community, and sparks creativity by fostering neighborhood book exchanges around the world. Throughout Little Free Library, millions of books are exchanged each year, profoundly increasing access to books and reads for all ages and backgrounds. We would also like to give a special thank you to Joseph Saladino, the director of Oyster Bay East Norwich Library, the Brooke Chapman Foundation. They donated some books and some money to help us with the project, and Mr. Cabrera from Dominus Hardware in Oyster Bay. They helped us out with a lot of our supplies, and they gave us a lot of good ideas for our project.
Would anyone else like to say a few words? Is Lorraine DeFiglia here? That's you. You're Lorraine. Great. Great. All right. Thank you, ladies. My colleagues on the Oyster Bay Town Board are proud to salute the actions of the leaders and members of Girl Scout Troop 104 in East Norwich and Oyster Bay for your work on the Free Little Library. Your efforts, in our opinion, have truly made a positive difference, and you clearly send the right message of love and help and building a great community. And we know our future is in good shape in your hands. These good deeds are the foundation of a healthy community, and everyone will benefit by your project. If Councilman Ambrodo, would you help us by presenting this? And if we'd all like to come down, we'll make a presentation to you all. If you'd step over here, please, ladies. Still for how many years? will all be future Scout leaders for many years. Our receiver of taxes, Mr. Stefanich, has been a troop leader for over 50 years.
And he was my scoutmaster.
Thank you very much. Is that a great job? Didn't they do a great job, ladies and gentlemen? Okay, if that's our pre-meeting business, will the town clerk please poll the board?
Supervisor Saladino,
Present?
Councilman Muscarella,
Here.
Councilman McEnon,
Here.
Councilwoman Lessing,
Here, good evening, Jim.
Councilwoman Johnson said that she has family obligations, so she'll be absent tonight. Councilwoman Roberta
Present.
and Councilman Hale.
Here.
We have a few things to table, suspend, and walk on. We can get them all on the calendar, and then we can move forward where people can speak. May I have a motion to table resolution number 593? I'm sorry. May I have a motion to table resolution number 593? I was told 593. Is it 592 or 592?
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Councilman Muscarella, second by Councilman McEnon. On the vote, Supervisor Saladino?
Aye.
Councilman Muscarella?
Aye.
Councilman McEnon?
Aye.
Councilwoman Lesia?
Aye.
Councilwoman Johnson is absent. Councilman Imbrodo?
Aye.
And Councilman Han.
Aye.
Motion to table Resolution 592 passes with 6 ayes. May I have a motion to suspend the rules and add resolutions number 598 and 599? On the motion.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Councilman Muscarella, seconded by Councilman McEnon. On the vote, Supervisor Saladino?
Aye.
Councilman Muscarella?
Aye.
Councilman McEnon?
Aye.
Councilwoman Lesia?
Aye.
Councilwoman Johnson is absent. Councilman Imbrodo?
Aye.
And Councilman Han.
Aye.
Motion to suspend the rules and add resolutions number 598 and 599 passes with 6 ayes. May I have a motion to resuspend the rules and add the following walk-on resolution number 600? And I'll have to read that. Whereas Richard W. Lenz, Commissioner of Department of Public Works, by memorandum dated September 8, 2017, has advised that the town has reached an agreement with the town's insurance carrier, York Risk Service Group, Inc., the carrier, relative to the reconstruction of North Massapequa Community Center, by which the reconstruction work will be performed by Barr Construction Corp., 2536 Jackson Avenue, Long Island City, New York, 11101 as contractor, and Signal USA LLC, 2490 Industrial Road Drive, Troy, Michigan, 48084 as construction manager, both under the direct contract of the carrier. And whereas the aforesaid mentioned memorandum, Commissioner Lenz recommended and requested that the town board of the town of Oyster Bay, the town board authorizes the supervisor or his designee to execute any and all documents necessary to provide for the reconstruction of the North Massapequa Community Center by the carrier's chosen contractor at no cost to the town pursuant to plans and specifications that have been approved by the Department of Public Works. Now therefore be it resolved that the request and recommendations and herein above set forth is acceptable and approved, and the supervisor or his designee is hereby authorized to execute any and all documents necessary to provide for the reconstruction of the North Massapequa Community Center at no cost to the town pursuant to plans and specifications that have been approved by the Department of Public Works, and such work to be performed by Barr Construction Corp., 2536 Jackson Avenue, Long Island City, New York, 11101 as contractor, and Signal USA LLC, 2490 Industrial Road Drive, Troy, Michigan, 48084 as construction manager, both under the direct contact of York Risk Service Group, Inc. Okay.
So moved. Second.
Motion made by Councilman Muscarella, seconded by Councilman McEnon. On the vote, Supervisor Saladino?
Aye.
Councilman Muscarella?
Aye.
Councilman McEnon?
Aye.
Councilwoman Alessia?
Aye.
Councilwoman Johnson is absent. Councilman Ambrodo?
Aye.
Councilman Hand?
Aye.
Motion to resuspend the rules and add the following walk-on resolution number 600 passes with 6 ayes. Now I'll go through the whole calendar. May I have a motion to adopt resolutions number P-21-17 through resolution 600, noting that 592 was tabled. On the motion.
So moved. Second.
Okay, now you have all your speakers, Supervisor.
Thank you. Thank you. Our first speaker on our resolutions is Mr. Michael Price.
He's got 3 minutes. Turn it on.
Good evening, councilmen and women, and Supervisor Saladino. My name is Michael Price. I'm a Bethpage resident and a council representative for the Northeast Regional Council of Carpenters. I would like to thank the board for passing the resolution to amend the apprenticeship language in the town of Oyster Bay. The town of Oyster Bay has always been a friend of labor and very progressive with their support of apprenticeship. This resolution will ensure that only contractors with legitimate apprentice programs that graduate will be allowed to work in the town. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Mr. Kevin McKenna of Syosset.
It's 10 minutes.
Good evening, Kevin McKenna, Syosset, New York. On Resolution 557, which is for the Order of the Sons of Italy. I read the backup yesterday, which was published very, very late online. I just want to point out that with 60-some-odd resolutions, I find it, I don't know what the word is, to put all this information online at the end of a day and then expect the council who has to vote on it to be able to understand it and for the public to be able to understand it, it just does not seem right that it's put online so late.
Kevin,
But be that as it may,
excuse me. Don't take much of your time. I did some research into this. They pared down their request from the town quite a bit. They're only using one showmobile, which they're renting, and they're not using any golf carts. But continue.
thank you for following up on the email I sent today, but my main question on this is, when you read the backup, the letter from the gentleman, Tony Ventura, the order, he asks acting secretary, acting deputy, acting supervisor Joe Muscarella, back in January, he sent you a letter, and he asked you to provide a detailed list of the charges that it seems that the Order of the Sons of Italy would have been happy to pay. It's stated right in his letter. And when I read the backup, I don't see any...
The current or the past you're referring to?
No, I'll read it to you. It says in his letter, he asks for an itemization. I'm not going to spend my time looking for the page, but it says in the letter, he asks for an itemization of the charges that his organization would incur in order for the different departments to provide whatever equipment is necessary. And nowhere in the backup was an itemization provided for what those charges are. So my question is, who came up with a $1,500 donation for this event? I look at other events that are going on inside the town, and they cost a heck of a lot more than $1,500. So why does this group get such special treatment? And the real question is, why didn't the town answer his request?
Commissioner, would you please come
Or did
forward?
the town answer his request?
Supervisor, I can shed some light on this. I don't know what letter Mr. McKenna is referring to. I do know that he sent the letter in like he did last year. It's the same exact letter they sent to the town last year. I personally sat down with Mr. Ventura and the Sons of Italy. I am a member of the Sons of Italy. And I sat down with him and I went through all of the expenses and the costs that the town board had passed via resolution. And the Sons of Italy themselves opted just to get the one showmobile. We aren't providing golf carts any longer. That's a town-wide thing now. We're not providing the golf carts. So the only thing that they would have had from us would be the showmobiles and the generator lights, which they opted out of getting any generator lights.
And they also have the garbage cans and the safety barriers.
Yeah, that comes, and the highway does all of that.
Right, but that's still a town, same
That's still a
same
town,
plans, different
cones.
pockets.
They're asking for 60 complete barricades, 65 sort pails, 2 highway packers,
Yep.
a street sweeper. They don't need that anymore?
No, I believe they are getting that from the highway department.
Okay, so again, where's the cost associated with that?
We don't charge any of our organizations for any of
But
those items.
they asked for, here's the letter. It says, there's a letter dated January 27th to Acting Supervisor Muscarella, and then he wrote in handwritten notes, Brother Joe. Obviously, you know each other.
Okay.
He wrote, once we have received a schedule of charges for the town equipment use for the various departments, we will complete all the equipment use permit applications
What date was that letter?
within, this is January 27, 2017. And also, which is not in the backup, is copies of the equipment use permit applications. But my main concern is, from this letter, it appears they were willing to pay for these things, and we didn't even give them a price for it.
Well, because we don't have anything on as a resolution. There was never been a town board approval to charge for, barricades or cones or anything like that. The resolution is strictly for showmobiles and lights, and fields and stuff like
All
that.
right, Commissioner, this is on par with other organizations,
Every organization in the
nonprofit
town that-
organizations.
and,
Is this
sure-
up?
Yeah, I'm sure Commissioner Les could also shed some light on this, but any organization in the town of Oyster Bay gets charged for showmobiles and lights, and I don't believe anyone gets charged because we don't have any charges on our records or books to go out and charge for barricades and cones and, recycling bins. That's never been something we did.
Commissioner, it's been under your leadership that we've started charging for these showmobiles, recur some of the costs, correct?
Yes, and that letter was from January. I didn't get in until March 7th, as you all know, and I sat with Mr. Ventura shortly after, March 7th when we took over.
So you feel comfortable it's a reasonable charge and everything?
Yeah, it's the charge everybody else gets. $250 for a showmobile is the charge everybody else has.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Mr. McKenna.
All right, well,
Was that be?
that'll be it for this evening.
Thank you,
Thank you
Mr.
very much.
McKenna. Our next speaker is Kenneth Kramer, Massapequa Park.
Just one resolution, it's 3 minutes.
Kenneth Kramer, Massapequa Park. I guess this is on the drone issues that were brought up. I would like to say I thank the town of Oyster Bay for having us come in and sit down with you guys and go through the different opinions of the people from the town on this issue. And we were able to come up with many resolutions on this, and I have it in front of me. I wish I would have had it a couple of days earlier. It's nice to get it at 5 o'clock at night on the day before anything is said, but it would have been much nicer on a Monday. There are some minor items I would like to discuss in this particular chapter that you're trying to put through. I see the permits being made for different time frames, one between October and April, and another one from May to September. I understand why that's done, and I agree with it. I just don't know why we don't stick with what every other personal town in the world has done. Labor Day, Memorial Day. Everybody knows those 2 days. Everybody's going to be on board with those 2 days. That's when you go and get your permits for your go to the beach. That's when you do everything for that. Why do we want to adjust the world for that type of scenario?
Some people use the pools after Labor Day, and since the dressing rooms were built in the 50s and early 60s without a roof, there's obviously a privacy issue. So we wanted to make sure that we struck a balance of fully respecting both hobbyists and professional drone users, as well as protecting the rights of privacy of our residents. And many residents brought this to our attention, asking for the legislation. So we worked with you all and found a good compromise.
I wanted to know your logic behind it. Again, if it would have been a little earlier, Matt would have answered with the logic on this, and we would have been able to not even talk about this. If it is a permit for a period of time, why are we asking for dates of activity to be conducted?
The way this works, and for everyone's information, our statute includes the following. We are allowing membership in the Academy of Model Aeronautics to serve as proof of the liability insurance. $1 million per occurrence, $2 million aggregate. That's obviously if anyone gets hurt. From October 1st until April 31st, you just get the permit and you use your drone at will. This covers landing and taking off from town property. So
the way the form is written,
yes,
the way we're reading it here, it doesn't say that particularly in its general, in the way it's said. It basically says all these things and all these things. So if it's written this way, that means we have to write it that way.
Well, I think it's relatively clear, and we can bring Matt Rosea up. But basically, you don't need to contact the town, you just need the permit. And I want to make it very clear that there's no charge for this permit. Some people were frustrated with the fact that the media didn't get that information out. We're not looking to charge anyone, and there's no criminal penalties, only the civil penalties of a fine for breaking the ordinance. So from May 1st to September 30th, that's the times when people are out sunning themselves in bathing suits, using our pools, more children outside, and to protect their privacy. If something is spotted, for instance, on the internet, we want to be able to go back and know who was using their drone with their camera on that particular day. But we didn't want to make it so difficult so as to have to report every single day all year long, because it's a little different situation during the colder months.
I understand that, and I agree with you on that, in that sense. The timeframes of 9 to 7 p.m. over that period of a time, under the laws of the FAA and other ones, we can't fly we can only fly a half hour after sunset. And as of right now, which would be in that time frame, I would not be able to fly at all for that day in the evening because sunset's already at 7 o'clock. So if the number between 9 and 7 was adjusted, for us, most of us who are going to be flying these types of drones that are over, or planes or anything else, over the weight limit of 2 pounds, we're more in a better hobbyist. We're looking at what we're doing. We are going out usually to look at sunrise, sunset from a photography point of view. And the law says we can fly under the FAA. It says we can fly a half hour before sunrise and 1 hour. And if we were to do an item that says more like a half hour before sunrise, 1 hour after sunrise, 1 hour before sunset, half hour after sunset, that would allow us, without the permitting process of going over and over and in, to file for that over the whole course of the summer, which is most of the time when no one's going to be at the beaches in the first place, very few, or at most of the parks where we would be doing our flying. That would be an acceptable, time frame for us. That would cover probably 98% of the people flying as of right now during the summer hours. And the other 2% would be filing for the permits when they want to go during the day. I don't know if that would be a worthwhile amendment. I think it would be a worthwhile amendment. I think it would cut down on your paperwork immensely, and you would satisfy almost all of the photography people in the world. Because I also look at it and say, well, if you're asking for a camera and you're saying, what is the camera? Why is this camera on this drone in this particular draft that you have? I say, are you asking that of every person who walks into the park with their camera? Why do they not get attacked for the camera they're having?
Well, it's very clear, and we went over that in so many different board meetings and public sessions, that when someone has a drone, it gives them the ability to
take pictures like my 600 millimeter zoom?
Well, it's a little different. When someone's on the ground, there's a little different expectation, and you can see them. Having said that,
Having photos of the sun the other day.
Having said that, we're very happy to take your views into consideration and to consider an amendment to further improve upon the legislation.
I would accept that as if it was something that's going to be looked at, if you guys are going to be approving this particular amendment tonight with these types of amendments on them.
Mr. Kramer, do I understand that for the most part, other than these minor squibbles, you support the legislation? You think that it's a fair compromise?
I do think it's a fair compromise.
Okay, because we had many meetings with stakeholders in the drone community and the photography community to hammer out these details, to have something that's workable for everybody. So you think that for the most part it was a good compromise, but there's a couple minor tweaks that you would suggest?
Yes, I would agree, and someone else will be up here.
So perhaps we could revisit that at a later date, just so we have a framework that works for everybody, and then we can revisit it.
Some of the other people who came into the group
Yeah.
and met and sat down weren't able to make it tonight, and some of these comments were discussed amongst them, and they seem to agree with that type of scenario also.
Okay, good. So if you could provide us with something in writing, maybe with some further suggestions, we could revisit that at a later date.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. In relation to the people that were previously mentioned, we have letters from Scott Harrington, who said, unfortunately, I have an obligation that came up last minute, would not be able to attend the hearing, but he would appreciate it if the following letter could be read out loud at the hearing. As an Oyster Bay resident and local UVA-based business owner, I'd like to commend the town board for their decision to accept input from the local hobbyists and commercial UAV community to draft tonight's proposed ordinance. Creating sensible legislation for this emerging technology is no simple task, and the town's openness to input has helped create what I believe is the best UAV legislation yet on Long Island. My hope is that other towns in the near future will look to Oyster Bay as an example of UAV law that works, a law that is smartly addresses privacy and noise concerns without putting an economic burden on the many great UAV startups in the area. In passing this ordinance, I hope we can ensure that drones are operated in this town safely and courteously. Thank you again to the town board and town attorney for the great work, Scott Harrington. We also have a letter from Anthony Anzalone. Dear Town Board and Supervisor Saladino, I am one of a small group of UAV pilots that attended the meeting with Mr. Rosea to discuss this legislation. Unfortunately, I cannot attend this evening. However, I would like to thank the board and Mr. Rosea for taking the time to listen to our input and incorporating our advice and expertise in crafting this new draft. It was a pleasure working with Mr. Rosea. After careful review, I feel this groundwork is substantially better to what was previously brought to the table. At this time, I have no other objections to the draft that is being proposed. However, I encourage the town board to consider this a work in process and continue to be open to suggestions if issues arise. Respectfully, Anthony Anzalone, and I can say for one that we are very open to suggestions as they arise and future amendments to this legislation. Our next speaker is Ed Anderson.
Good evening, everyone. Ed Anderson, Syosset. I was one of the people who came in at the last discussion of this bill. And I also want to compliment the town board. Thank you to Matt for spending the time with us to take input from the community. It is very well reflected in the new legislation, which I also endorse. And since I came in with such strong objections to the previous one, I felt I wanted to come down personally to say how much I appreciate your openness to input, and I think that this is a very fine piece of work. I have a couple of minor suggestions, and as you put in context, I have no problem with the bill as it stands, just an offering of a couple of small points. The first one has to do with the penalties. Since this substantially involves regulation of an activity which has, to this date, not been regulated at all by the town, I'm concerned that people are not going to be able to know about it. So your first offense here is a $500 penalty. So the average hobbyist has been flying in the park for the last 30 years, safely and without incident. Someone who is now enforcing this says, oh, here's a bill for $500 for doing what you've been doing your whole life. I suggest that you institute a first offense warning that can then be recorded so a repeat offender can be recognized rather than hitting them with an immediate bill of $500. So just a suggestion. I think it'll go a long way to avoiding seriously disgruntled citizens. Another minor point, and again, none of these are what I would call showstoppers, just offers of suggestions. And I think this goes somewhat to what Ken was trying to talk about. Your permit is for a period, October this to April that, or whatever the dates were. But on one of the details that has to be filled in, it says, and on what date are you going to be flying? Well, I'm going to be flying from October this to April that. So there's an assumption here that this is a single instance when in fact it's not. It's just an inconsistency of the permitting process with the rule. That's all it is.
And you're referring to the application form
Yes.
itself? Okay, yeah, we could work on
It's
that.
just something that, because I would look at this and I would go, how the heck do I fill that in? It's a 6-month permit. I'm going to fly from October 1st to this, that. The second item that I wanted to bring, again, it's around the permitting, has to do with whether or not this is a permit for a person or a permit for a device. Because as I was reading through this, it appears to be that you're permitting me as opposed to any device. I fly model airplanes. I don't fly drones. But I have 30 aircraft. Now, do I need 30 permits? Or do I need one permit to permit me to use my 30 aircraft in accordance with the regulation? It's a matter of clarification. when we went through the FAA registrations, which were then struck down, I was registered, not my aircraft. So I think you just need to clarify in this, in your bill, what's being registered here. Just like my driver's license doesn't say which car I drive, it says I'm permitted to drive. So just a clarification on the permitting process. The last is it doesn't say how the permit is going to be handled. At the last meeting, we talked about this being done online on a website. There's no reference to it here. So is this something that people are going to have to come down to town hall to get a permit? Or is there going to be a website for it? Just a question to you that has to be addressed. The last item is how are you going to publicize this? Again, you're now regulating something that has never been regulated before. A lot of this is hobby activity, people flying in the parks, things I did with my dad when I was a kid. How are people going to be notified that now this activity is regulated? So I don't know what the normal procedure is, but again, this goes back to the warning. This goes back to people who want to comply with the rule, want to comply with the law, have no desire to break any rules, just don't know they exist. So just some thoughts for you, but again, my compliments to the town, to Matt for the fine work that was done here. This is a tremendous improvement over what we saw before. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Paul Molinari. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor and town board members. I recall when the hearing on this legislation a couple of months ago, about a week after it, there was a lawsuit. So how's this legislation, these codes going to be impacted by that lawsuit? Is the lawsuit settled or is it still ongoing?
Which legislation are you referring to?
Or better yet, which lawsuit?
On wireless communication.
594.
Matt, would you please step up, please? Matt Rosea, Deputy Town Attorney.
Very, very simple answer. The litigation is ongoing. The town has just recently answered the first amended complaint, and so the litigation will now move forward, whether by motion practice or into discovery.
And how will our code change affect that legislation?
Right now, it's independent of each other. Our ordinance is not an issue with the litigation.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. And Bob Fryer.
Good evening, Bob Fryer, Woodbury, New York. No one, I didn't think I heard an answer in his question regarding the permitting. Is that going to be online? Right
Yes.
When would that be effective?
Well,
Tomorrow?
let's see.
If you
It
pass
will be
it?
soon afterwards, yes.
Okay.
As well as signage where appropriate, as well as other means of getting that information out.
Okay.
Are you a hobbyist or commercial flyer?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Okay, personnel resolutions. Again, after you vote, I'd appreciate if you could list exactly who is transferring what, or who is getting hired and moved around, and exactly what salaries. Resolution 536, that's a contract for Doug Wilkie for the North Massapequa Community Center. I see his original contract, or his original bid was $79,000. Why is there an increase of $15,000? Should I just go through all of them and then you can answer?
Sure.
Okay. 545, $250,000 to Besson Contracting, and I know that's under a requirements contract, so I'm curious why you just decided to renew that versus going out for new bids. Resolution 582, more business for Nelson and Pope. Just want to point out, from the optics of that, Rose Walker works there, and we continue to give them lots. She's an ex-council person here. We continue to give them more and more contracts. For 593, could you go into a little bit of more detail on the telecommunications facilities consultant and how you're using, and who that is and how you're using them? And then 598, could you give details on this settlement of this lawsuit? And that's about it. I'll go back and listen to your answers.
Okay, on 593, that would be, I believe, Commissioner Lenz?
Good evening. $593 is really, it's telecommunications. That's really P&D.
Okay.
In this particular time.
Commissioner, would you step
But
forward?
I have some other.
I know there's a highway component to it, so you can, why don't you take a seat right in front, and so we can talk about that too. But we'll start off with Commissioner Macarone.
Yes, Resolution 593 is to bring on a consultant to Planning and Development who we procured through our town's procurement policy. The name of the firm is Center for Municipal Solutions, and they are one of the leading companies in the country. They have overseen over 5,000 installations of cellular communication towers and antennas. As you know, the Planning and Development had not issued any, we were not charged with any issuing of any permits in the town highway right-of-ways. Any existing cell towers on private property or antennas, they do come through Planning and Development under our zoning ordinance. However, in the right-of-ways, we have never been charged with administering that program. So under this new legislation that's being passed tonight, Planning and Development will be coordinating with the Highway Department, but we will be issuing the permits and overseeing the entire process. We, based upon the federal legislation and rules and regulations that we have to comply with, it is a learning curve for the Department of Planning and Development. The staff has been gearing up over the last few months. The plan examiners have been reading the legislation, speaking with other municipalities who already have some legislation in place, and educating themselves. This consultant will work with us because there's very tight guidelines as municipalities have to respond and review building permit applications for these things. We have a 150-day time frame. It's called a shot clock. So when an application is submitted, we must begin reviewing the applications within that 150 days, and any comments we give back to an applicant, they can take as long as they want, but as soon as they submit the application, the clock starts ticking again. So this is a 2-year contract. It's based upon, our needs, if we need to use them. One thing that is very important to note is that this is no cost to the town of Oyster Bay. The applicants, when an application is submitted, they're required to set up a trust account, and any money that is spent for the consultant will be drawn from the trust account and will be replenished as needed. So, and this consultant has worked for a number of municipalities on Long Island, including Great Neck, Laurel Hollow, South Holds, Town of Hempstead. There's a number of municipalities, and so that's kind of where we are tonight.
Can you tell the audience and those watching on the internet, under what conditions would a special use permit from the ZBA be required?
There are certain, whether it's in a residential zone or a commercial zone, Those would go before the Zoning Board of Appeals, and there would be a public hearing. But getting to the Zoning Board of Appeals, there is a lot of background information, site visits, balloon tests, all the things that have been put into the new legislation. We will be reviewing ahead of time, within the 150 days, including the Zoning Board of Appeals hearing. So it is a very condensed timeframe, but there will be, public notice to the residents of that area. The ordinance calls for and really strives for co-location, not placing these in residential zones, to enhance the quality of life, to try to get them in the commercial zones, to see where existing poles exist so that we're not installing new poles. And those are the things that the consultant will work with us in our site visits.
That's probably one of the most important factors here, clearly a motivation, and we've discussed this. Talk to us a little bit more about our discussions about keeping these out of residential areas.
Yes, that is one of the goals that we will work and strive for. The applicant will be required to provide us with a map and try to demonstrate why they need a pole or an antenna in a certain location, but then we will go out to try to find an area. We will look to place them on municipal property, maybe perhaps located them near sumps, away from residential areas, in commercial establishments, as well as they have to demonstrate the need for this type of structure in the location that they're asking for.
And based upon your research, would it appear as though this is one of the most stringent codes in the nation?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
Why do you say that?
Just based upon all the studies that need to be reviewed when they submit their applications, and all the checkpoints that are in place to provide for a full review of any of these antennas in the right-of-way, whether it's what we call a whip antenna or, a major tower, which, technology is going away from the major towers. There are all these smaller antennas that are going up. But we have to keep in times with the new technology. And, this new ordinance will help us with that.
Are there any other questions for the Commissioner? No. Thank you very much, Commissioner. Commissioner, would you join us? We want to speak to some of the highway aspects of this process.
What originally was happening is, as discussed earlier, these are right-of-way antennas that were being put in on telephone poles and things like that. After reviewing it, when we came into office, I realized that this was needed to be researched even more so, and that's why we wound up looking into changing the code and also getting a different consultant to assist us in this area.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Do you want me to answer the other questions also while I'm up here?
Thank you.
Okay, the 582, Resolution 582, was to put a concrete restoration contract out for emergencies. It's just a requirement. Yes, sir.
We discussed this at our meeting,
Yes.
that we have to have it just in case, God forbid, another hurricane hits up here and the trees take the sidewalk out. We have to have something so we can go right away, so we don't have to go out to bid.
That's exactly what it was for. And in assisting us, we used Nelson and Pope to assist us in putting the specification together. That was the reason why we went that way. On Resolution 545, what we're asking for is to have an existing contract with Benson. It's a second-year contract. Now, there's a misinterpretation in what the resolution says. It's only a maximum of $250,000. When I say only, that's to repair the methane piping, methane treatment facility, and methane flaring system. That's again, this is just a requirement emergency contract. This is not a permanent contract. It wasn't a bid or anything. It was bid last year, and we're just extending the contract for a second year in case of an emergency on the methane at Old Bethpage landfill.
Commissioner, we're very happy with the services.
Yes, we have been, and that's why I felt it was necessary to do it again. In the past, we had used Benson for the treatment plant. Over the years, we have done the town of Oyster Bay has done such an excellent job on the treatment plant. We have turned that over to the DEC because our treatment is not necessary at Old Bethpage landfill anymore. We have treated everything we need to, and now they have another plume that they're taking care of with that. So again, this is only for the methane treatment facility. On Resolution 536, what we did is we bid the project. This is for the North Amityville Community Center. North Massapequa. I've said that so many times, I'm sorry, I don't know why that comes out. North Massapequa Community Center, we bid it. Well, first of all, let me back up for a second. The insurance company said that they feel the job is worth around $900,000. We bid it, it came, and that's using a single prime contract. It came in at 1.4. I said, okay, well, we're not close to the insurance company. We repackaged it, bid it again, and it came 1.2, and that's using a 4 prime contract. So we went back to the drawing board. So that's for this, for Wilkie to repackage everything and to rebid it. Okay, so we went back to the drawing board, and now we went to the insurance company and said, hey, listen, we got 2 bids, one 1.4, 1.2. What can you do for us? They reviewed with different contractors, various contractors, and they're willing to do it through the insurance monies. So it's no additional cost to the town to rehabilitate this facility.
Are they going to follow the labor laws in the
They're going to follow the labor laws.
Certified payrolls?
Yes, sir.
And we're going to have apprentice language requirement?
Yes.
And we have a clerk of the works who's going to count the heads and do the job properly?
Yes.
That's the first time in this town in a long time.
I understand what you're saying. We will be on top of this at all costs.
That's critical, Commissioner.
Yes.
To make sure.
Was there any other one? I just want to make sure I didn't miss one. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. And Anthony Villa. Anthony, could you please give us your full name and your full address for the record?
Sure. Anthony Villa, 270 Motor Parkway, Hart Park, New York. Town Board regarding Resolution 600. Just like to ask if the prevailing wage laws will be adhered to, along with the apprenticeship language, and as just mentioned, the certified payrolls.
Yes, we just asked that question, asked and answered. The answer is yes.
Yes, sir. Just confirming. Thank you very much, though.
Thank you very much. If there is no one else.
Supervisor, I have a question on one of the speakers.
Sure, well, I'm going to make sure everyone who hasn't gone yet, you're still looking at that? Okay, Mr. McKenna, let's not set a precedent, but give you the opportunity to ask a question.
Commissioner Macarone just mentioned the name of the communications consultant. Could I get that name and?
Sure. Commissioner, could you repeat the name again?
Sure, Center for Municipal Solutions.
Municipal Solutions?
Municipal Solutions.
Okay. Are you hiring the company, or is there a specific individual that you already know about in that company?
Well, we are hiring the company, and there's a person.
What is the name of the individual that apparently you have the confidence in? This is actually the industry that I've spent a lot of time in.
Richard Comey.
Colby?
Comey.
Comey? Richard Comey?
Yes.
Thank you. And then the other quick question on Commissioner Lenz just talked about the Community and Youth Center. Could you, what are the plans for that building? What is it going to be used for?
Seniors.
It is going to stay for that?
Yes.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Yes.
Do I need to fill it out?
Just please come up. Yes, you can fill that out, but why don't you start off by giving us your name, full name and address for the record?
Sure. Jack Ostrick, 1 Elm Street in Woodbury, please. Thank you. I was just reviewing the revised 594. I was hoping that I couldn't pick it out of the new draft. I was just wondering what the new terms about inspection that are covered in the new draft of the legislation are.
Okay, let's bring the commissioner up. Come on up, Commissioner. Mr. Ulrich will repeat his question for you.
Hi, I was just reviewing the revised draft. I was wondering what the new terms regarding inspection of the wireless facilities are. I couldn't pick it out of the revised draft. I just want to understand it.
It's pretty straightforward. What we're requiring is that the carrier or the applicant who's responsible for the installation certify to the town on a semi-annual basis that its equipment is operating within the limits that have been established by the federal government and the FCC with respect to RF. Okay, so this is, but I want to be very clear about what this is. This is not regulating environmental effects. What we're doing is asking that they certify and provide the data to show that their equipment is operating within the limits established by the FCC. Alternatively, in certain cases, an actual RF test will be required of the applicant to demonstrate compliance with the regulations. But we're not regulating on the basis of environmental effects.
And the carrier is responsible for all those costs, not the taxpayers of the town.
Undoubtedly. Undoubtedly.
The second half of that is, what are the associated penalties with failure?
Well, if the equipment is not operating within the limits established by the FCC, I would imagine that there's, first of all, regulatory action that the FCC may take as against the carrier, but there is certain relief set forth in the ordinance with respect to noncompliance with the ordinance. But I don't want to speculate too far as to what may or may not happen with respect to a carrier or particular equipment that is or is not operating within the established limits.
Civil penalty.
Right.
It could be any number of forms of relief, yes.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be difficult.
I understand.
I didn't have a chance to read it, so I just don't know what the penalties are. I didn't see it in the ordinance.
Page 19 has the
Right.
offenses.
Here's his name.
For offenses.
It's in here. Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
All set?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, thank you for that. I appreciate it. I just want to thank the group of you. You moved swiftly. Our residents had a lot of concerns about this. I know there are a lot of other residents besides those in Hunting Hill, Woodbury. I appreciate the diligence that the office showed, the attorney's office and the office as a whole, talking with our residents. We have another upcoming meeting, so I'll be happy to brief them on this. The only other thing that I got an email about that's partially related to this is right at the entrance to our neighborhood, one of the existing poles, which I know are subject to ongoing discussions, and I don't want to have the group comment on that because I know you're involved in litigation. The only thing I wanted to bring to your attention is that the group let me know that the area where the pole was placed in the corner of Avery Road and Elm Street is where we wanted to put neighborhood signage. It's directly smack in the middle of, there are a number of communities within Woodbury that have signage for their neighborhood. So it's something I wanted to bring to the attention as part of the discussion with the group. It's not necessarily a health-related concern, because I know that's not going to get us very far, but in terms of the willingness to relocate that would help the group. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for recognizing our tremendous commitment to protecting the community. Mr. Rosea, would you please make sure that the carrier knows of the community's interest in placing signage at that location? Of course. Thank you. All right, then. Looks like there are no other speakers, so is there any correspondence?
No correspondence. Okay, I'll call for the vote, Supervisor.
Yes, please.
Okay, the motion to adopt resolutions P 21-17 through Resolution 600, noting that 592 was tabled. The motion was made by Councilman Muscarella, seconded by Councilman McEnone. On the vote, Supervisor Saladino?
Aye.
Councilman Muscarella?
Aye.
Councilman McEnone? Go slow.
No on 538.
Hold on.
It's 538.
Thank you. No.
539.
Right.
540.
Those are all no's. No on,
Noes. 573.
and 573.
Aye on the rest. Got that, Jen?
I have it. Thank you, sir. Okay. Councilwoman Alessia?
I just want to note for the record, Jim, that although I was not here for the hearings, I have reviewed the transcript, so I'm prepared to vote on them. And I am also a no on 538, 539, sorry.
The no on 538.
539, 540, 573.
Hold
and
on.
I as to the rest.
73. Councilwoman Johnson is absent. Councilman Ambroto?
I vote aye.
Okay. And Councilman Hand?
Aye.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. You're out of order, sir.
Okay, bear with me. Motions to adopt Resolution P21-17 through 537 passes with 6 ayes. 538 passes with 3 ayes and 2 nays. 4 ayes and 2 nays. 539, 4 ayes and 2 nays. 540, 4 ayes and 2 nays. 541 through 572 passes with 6 ayes. 573 passes with 4 ayes and 2 nays. 574 through 600 passes with 6 ayes, noting that 592 was tabled. Okay, the calendar is complete.
Thank you. Well, now as our meeting is now closed, may we have,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry.
Supervisor, I'll make a motion to close the meeting.
That's what I was asking for. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Against, nay. The ayes have it.
This one here? Yes. This here?
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to acknowledge an important aspect of this evening's resolution calendar. Resolution 575 was a street renaming, and we have renamed a street from Lewis Court to Heroes Court. From all 6 families have asked for this renaming. One of the residents on this street was a survivor of the attacks in 9/11. Thank God he survived those attacks, and the residents asked that we recognize not only his heroism, but the heroism of all of those who rescued people and everyone involved. So we are saddened, obviously, by the need for this, but we recognize the importance of doing this, and we thank you for bringing this to our attention, and God bless you all, the residents of Heroes Court. Our first speaker for the public speaking portion of our meeting is Kathleen Kralik.
Good evening, Mrs. Kralik.
Good evening, Supervisor and members. Some of you may remember me from a while ago, and before I start, I would just like to say that I'm a little bit embarrassed speaking about this in light of what's happened in Texas and Florida with the flooding and disasters. However, I'm here to discuss the flooding of my own street. As I said, many of you remember me from years ago. Linden Place, we are a dead end, okay? We have 2 feet of water, we have nowhere to go. These pictures can be passed around, please. I would appreciate it. When I was here over 5 years ago and discussed the problem at length, notifying the board that this has been going on since 1973, when I have pictures of people on the street in a rowboat, and then again when my own children had to be taken out of the street on a rowboat to get to the bus stop. Okay? At that time, they talked about some measures that would be taken, and there was some new drains placed on the street. I have a few pictures here of the drains that were placed. One of them, as you can see, has 2 holes in it. I don't know how 2.5 feet of water is supposed to go down. 2 holes. Another one has 4 holes, a little bit better. And then 3 of the drains, the older drains, do have kind of grading, okay? This was done, the street was dug up 5 years ago. Just because I haven't been here in 5 years does not mean that the problem got solved. Or
Did it ever get better at all?
No, not really. A little bit better. But there was no maintenance done on these drains. There's not a routine maintenance. They're not cleaned out. So what you have is all the leaves, all the clog, everything that runs off of Glen Cove Avenue and down onto Linden Place, because the way the road is pitched, in 2 directions off of Glen Cove Avenue, it just runs right down Linden Place. And again, please remember, we are a dead-end street, so when this happens, we can't go anywhere. Now, the first bad storm we had this year was June 24th. It was a Saturday. I started calling the emergency number at 7:30 in the morning. I called at 8:30. I called at 9:30. And then I called at approximately 10 o'clock. And every time I called, I got an answer from some gentleman. We're trying to get people in. Nobody will come in. It's a Saturday. I said, I don't really care. I can't get out of my street.
That's a bad answer, because we have people
Of course
on
it is.
Saturdays and Sundays during the day.
That is a very
Well, of
Just for
course
this
it is.
purpose.
Of course it is.
And this is Town of Oyster Bay that you called?
Yes, first I called Highway, and then I called the emergency
number.
Emergency
Who-
line.
Who has the ability to reach the people that work
Right.
at Highway.
Well, they said we would call.
But they have people on staff Saturday and Sunday for this purpose.
Well, nobody, the answer I got in 4 phone calls was, we can't get anybody to come in. We had 21 inches of water that day. Now, in this one picture, you can see that there is a little bit of bubbling up from one of the drains. But that day, 2 of my neighbors came out of their door to go to a family funeral and couldn't get anywhere. Another couple came out, they were supposed to go to their grandson's 4th birthday, and they couldn't go anywhere. None of us could go anywhere. I have another neighbor with me here tonight. He's the first house closest to all these drains. He has had multiple damage to his basement. On that day, last resort at 10 o'clock in the morning, we called Channel 12 News. They showed up in a half hour. A half hour later, a pump truck showed up. Fancy that. After Channel 12 started recording, a pump came. So now it's 3.5 hours, the water hasn't started to recede, and the pumps haven't started working. It took them an additional almost 3 hours to get the water, not gone, but to a level where anybody could get out of the street. If you don't have a truck, a high wheel or whatever, we can't leave the street, okay? The next flood came August 18th. Now, I know it was a bad storm, there was a lot of problems. This, by far, was our worst flood. It flooded entirely over Glen Cove Avenue and into Linden Place. And you can keep as many of these pictures you want, because I have them all. I've got many.
Okay.
So at this point, we're tired of hearing that the town is fighting with the county. We're a town road, Glen Cove Avenue is a county. The county wants nothing to do with our road, and the town says, well, the county has to take care of Glen Cove Avenue.
We'll get to the
We're
bottom
on
of this
Linden
right
Place.
now.
This is my street, that's what I'm worried about.
We understand.
And I'm fed up with this.
Mr. Bishop, let's get to the bottom of this, and I expect relief on this street very quickly.
I'm happy we're discussing it. Commissioner Lenz and myself have added this to a list that you will see on the next town board. There are going to be a number of designs that have to be committed to for the drainage structures, the additional basins that need to be installed on this street.
And clean out the existing
Well,
basins?
this is, that the day of, just so we can back up a little bit, the day of, it was a Saturday, the guys had to get the pumps, they were in Syosset Yard, not Lake Avenue Yard. The hoses and the attachments had to be put together. When the county road basins were not cleaned and they overflowed, it created a bigger flow down to these basins, which are inadequate, and we realize that. So the inadequate basins have to be addressed.
Have we been cleaning them out, doing normal
Yes.
maintenance on them?
I've had them,
Commissioner?
they cleaned out 4 county basins on the main road, and then they've done the basins on this block.
Doing it on a regular basis?
No, they've done it once.
They did it the day of the first storm, and then they did it again in August when the water was brown from the overflow from the garden
Now,
center.
okay, obviously it's June, August, September, October, we should do it again, we should do it in November again.
Absolutely, but I
Right,
want,
Until this problem's solved. That's one solution temporarily for this problem, is make sure we maintain the basins on a
Absolutely.
very regular basis, so we don't have this problem if it rains.
But as a priority,
Like, you know, your roof only leaks when it rains, the basins only fill when it rains, so let's clean them out.
as a priority, even with the cleaning, the additional basins that are required are the solution. So even if those basins are continually maintained,
Right, I understand.
we may still have this issue.
Commissioner, I understand that.
Yeah, that's very obvious from these photos, and these
But
residents.
you also gotta maintain.
Correct.
So they don't have this problem. It'd be less of a problem, if anything.
I have.
Could I just read you something?
5 years is way too long to keep our residents waiting. Way too long. We must have this on the very next town board agenda, and we must make sure that it's entirely rebuilt to a specification that will work. Not a guess, not a try, but something that will
Yeah.
absolutely work.
If they have
A design
yeah,
that
make
will
this
absolutely
for
work.
a 10-year rain, 10 inches, whatever it is.
Absolutely.
Make sure we have this.
The basins get taken care of the day they come to pump.
Right.
The day.
No,
they-
obviously.
What I'm saying is,
Then there is no
No
routine
maintenance.
maintenance of them. There
That's
hasn't
what I'm-
ever been.
Ms. Greg, that's what I'm asking them, to
Yeah.
make sure we get this down. If it's once a month, if it's once every 2 weeks, so when it rains, you're not worried about it.
Could I just read a quick statement
yeah,
from
sure,
the paper of
sure.
July 16th,
Sure.
1973,
Okay.
from a gentleman, I'm sure he's not around anymore, I don't know him from my block. Anthony Verricchio has lived on the corner of Glen Cove Avenue and Linden Place for about 60 years. He remembers when the PWA put the sidewalks in, and said the drainage had been planned even then. His quote, "Those drainage plans have been on the drawing board for 40 years." That was in 1973.
Yeah, we're absolutely convinced that there's a major problem here. Your research is greatly appreciated, but there's no doubt that there's a problem, and cleaning of drains is nowhere near enough. We need this on the very next town calendar. I'm very serious and adamant about having this on the next town calendar and then moving very
Yeah, but
quickly
Supervisor,
to
without
begin
proper
construction.
maintenance- Without proper maintenance.
That's what I understand.
We're gonna
understand.
have this problem no matter how many drains we have in there.
But
I
there were
understand.
grates, let me ask you, Commissioner, there were grates, they show here, 3 grates that are open, 4 grates that just have 2 little holes. Can we at least put the grates on for the 4? Would that alleviate the problems? A little bit?
It depends, there's,
I'm not sure what pictures you have,
there are different drainage structures.
county and
Some are
some towns, yes.
So I can do what I can with the town ones.
Okay.
But we did go into the county ones because once we sucked that water out, it stopped the overflow from coming into the block so that we can address their street. That's why it took longer to get any of the water level down on the block, because we had to stop where the initial.
We are asking you, we're directing you
Yes.
to speak to your counterparts in the county so they're on board as well. If you get any pushback, immediately call me.
Absolutely.
Also, whoever the county legislator is also should be notified.
Yeah, we will no longer allow this to drag on. It's outrageous that you've had to deal
By the
with this for
next
years.
town board meeting, you will have a document on here for a
Good.
design for a correct system.
And I want the number one priority in the town to be cleaning those out in the meantime.
Absolutely.
So we're doing everything possible, and we're rebuilding it, and we're getting it right the first time. So Commissioner, you're responsible to make sure that these designs work.
Supervisor, we'll take care of it.
I just want to say that about 2 weeks ago, there was a truck that came and pumped what I call a main drain, kind of on the corner. We were supposed to get some rain in a few days. The rain was not very hard. No. And the 1/4 of the corner and the drain was already flooded. And that was without a bad rainstorm. And the truck had been there the day before.
Well, I
So-
knew the storm was coming, so I told them, I want you on that block, get to the drain, make sure we don't have a problem, and put the pumps in Lake Avenue, so if we do have an issue, we can get the pumps there quicker and not have them travel a longer distance to get there.
Well, that was the other thing.
But the drains, again, are inefficient.
Is
They're not
is everything
enough
pitched
that-
properly? It sounds like,
it's not
sounds like
only-
the pipes aren't
it's-
pitched properly.
It's not even
Right.
just a pitch. I don't even think that they're deep enough to hold enough water to have it leach in and reduce.
Commissioner,
very next
as-
board meeting.
As part of my committee, I'll sit with you and we'll work on this.
Definitely.
Thank
Please,
you,
thank you.
Councilman.
This is my husband, I'm sorry.
Hi, how are
Bob
you?
Kralik.
You have a 75-foot drain, a 60 and a 50, plus the original one that's been out of the outlet. The last rainstorm, I parked my car, climbed over the fence to the doctor's office, took my shoes off, rolled my shorts up. The water was this deep on the sidewalk. Wow. They can't put no storm drains into that. When they pump all of the water, one block
To the next block.
north to Willow Place, it runs
Excuse
down
me.
the street. Some guy in the middle of the block got a concrete pad in front of his house with a drain. All the water
Goes into there.
Where the hell does that water go?
Yeah. It's funny that you're saying this, when I had first had this, we brought this to engineering's attention. The block next to it has a different drainage connection. It seems to be that there's a garden center that has those pipes all route around each other.
Yeah.
That backs it. That's why the water was so muddy, because the garden center mud was filling the water, so it wasn't just street water or rainwater. It came over. So when that occurred, but the other block next to it, that drain drains into a different sump. So that's why, in addition to adding the additional drain, you have to make sure that the pipe is directed to a location that can take the water, a sump that.
I have an additional suggestion. Would you all like to meet with our team, our employees that are involved in this? Would you like to give them detailed information? Let's set up an appointment so they can meet with you and a representative from our engineering team, our best representative, okay? Loud and clear? Okay. And this way, your information can go directly with a map present, so you can show them exactly on the map, and they can take all of your information and input it into the calculations to get this done right the first time.
Would I be able to get my, yes, pictures back for them, please?
Certainly, certainly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
And as I stated
Very much.
before,
I
this will
appreciate your
be...
help.
Sorry you had to
Again.
deal with this.
Yes, we apologize. You've had to deal with this for so long.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Arthur Edelman. Mr. Edelman, I just have to step out for a few minutes, but please continue. The board will be listening, and I'll
You'll be
getting
listening.
information.
Okay.
Absolutely. I'll be right back.
Strange that these people have an overabundance water and they're in lead, and I'm here to talk about New York American water. Our other problem.
Thank you for being here again, Mr. Edelman.
Last month, you guys, we passed a resolution approving the fire hydrant expenditure for Glenwood.
Yes.
Fire Protection District for $750 per hydrant. I've been in touch with Carmen Torino, president of New York American Water, trying to get the basis for how they come to this number. And he told me that, well, 63% of the, how do you say it? Here it is. Approximately 63% of the fire hydrant charges in your service area are from property taxes. Well, that was nice, so I asked him, writing back, what are the numbers? I'm not interested in percentages. Well, he came back to me and said after the most recent PSC, Public Service Commission, PSC rate hearings, they were granted a new fire hydrant rental fee based on their component-related property taxes of $582, which means going forward, the fire hydrant rental will be $922 per hydrant. I've been floored, and I've been posting this all over Facebook sites and other mass media, and this prompted a call from him to me. And his basic tone was, can you tone it down a bit? And I said, sure, I could tone it down
Tone it down a bit when you're paying these exorbitant rates to their water company.
I got a call from one of the commissioners of Glenwood. He goes, what are you talking about? We don't pay $750 per hydrant. And he does. He just didn't realize it because, as I talked with Mr.
Stefanich.
No W there.
The fire companies never really see the charges for the fire hydrant rental that goes through the town like this. And it just gets added to their full budget when you do your taxes. If the fire company's total expenses were $10,000 and the fire hydrants were $1,000, the total budget on that budget line would be $11,000 divided by the number of households, whatever. So this guy was floored by this number. So anyway, going back to the president of New York American Water, he goes, what can I do to get you to tone it down? And I said, I got an idea, and it would be a win-win for everybody because, as I explained to him, they're not doing anything wrong. They're operating within the parameters set up that they have to follow, and they got a wonderful business model to maximize their profits. And as he said, we're allowed we're allowed to have a return on our equity, which is a phrase I really don't understand, not a return on investment, but return of equity of 9.63%. And I go, wow, that's pretty good. They must have written that law when the interest rates were 15%. I had a mortgage when I was young, it was 14%. So I'm not getting anywhere with the guy. I said, but look, you're getting a lot of bad press. You want me to tone it down? I said, here's what you can do. I know the South Shore people in Merrick have instituted a Article 78 action. Seacliff is probably going to do a similar action. I said, why don't you write, I don't know if this is the right terminology, you guys could tell me, if you could do a friend of the court brief supporting these Article 78s and not fight the petitioners to allow them to open up the PSC hearings again, because they need to be opened up again.
And this is an Article 78 challenging the Public Service Commission's decision.
Right, findings, and they have to sue, I don't know the legalese. So that's where I left it with him. I had something else. The Article 78, he's going to, this is what I suggested. I said it would help. And I guess that's it.
Well, Mr.
I don't
Edelman,
know, I know what I want to do. Here's what I want you guys to do. I did the same request last night to Village of Seacliff. I'd like to know if it's possible for this board to make a resolution to return all the tax money you guys get from New York American Water to New York American Water. And that money would then go back to be funded by the taxpayers, which the taxpayers are paying anyway, because, you know, they're paying the tax, they come to us, we pay it out of the right pocket. I'd rather pay it directly to the town of Oyster Bay, have a tax bill, and get my tax deduction, because that's exactly what it's all about. They keep sounding out that they don't want to deal with taxes. They'd rather it was all gone. And I believed them, because like any merchant, they don't charge you tax when you buy something. When you buy a car, they're not charging you tax, right? They're collecting the tax. The governor has a tax bill, we got to collect the tax for the governor. So I'm asking if you guys just put, and madam, too, I'm sorry, could make maybe a symbolic resolution, because I know the state taxing authority, or the state legislature is the only one that has taxing jurisdiction over all us municipalities, that we don't want to take the money from New York American Water, give it back to them. Because it's got to stop. This is the only thing that's going to stop it. They don't want to pay the tax. They don't want to collect the tax.
Mr. Edelman, let me just ask counsel, Matt, if you would, is it possible that we can go forward with an amicus brief? There'd be no cost to the town. We would put it together, and it'll be a report to the, as a friend of the court, as Mr. Edelman had mentioned.
We certainly could prepare an amicus brief. I'd be more interested in submitting an amicus brief. It's town residents who are bringing the proceeding, the Article 78 proceeding. I think you just indicated the Seacliff or the group.
Seacliff says they're doing one.
Sure.
And the organization in Merrick, where you guys all, most of you are the South Shore residents?
No. Not Merrick.
No, but I mean, the Massapequa Water District, I mean, the water district that New York American Water covers down there, the organization I think is called CAWS.
Why don't we do
Mr. Edelman, I think that we would be happy to do
More
that.
than happy to write it.
And
More than
we
happy.
appreciate all of your efforts. We know you guys are struggling. People in your area are paying $900 a month, some, for their water bills. That's crazy.
What's scary is that if National Grid and PSEG grab the same business model, we're all going to be at the mercy of these public utilities. You know, the PSC is, someone's got to sit and talk to the governor about replacing the PSC with consumer-oriented folks, not, I don't know if they're all from upstate and they don't care. I just don't get it. I really don't. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edelman.
Okay, David Staton? David? All right, we'll move on. We'll see if he comes back. Kevin McKenna?
I think he's coming.
Oh,
He's coming.
David. Sorry. No, I apologize myself. I was moving along too quick.
David Staton, 349 West Nikolai Street in Hicksville. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you. I'm speaking on behalf of the hundreds or so of residents who live on or near Duffy Avenue in Hicksville, and as well as the many other residents who either travel on Duffy Avenue, walk, or bicycle on a regular basis. I'd like to bring to your attention some safety and other issues regarding this area. First, the safety issues. The posted speed limit on Duffy Avenue is 30 miles an hour, and it's rarely obeyed. There are no stop signs or traffic lights or any other traffic control devices for approximately 1.5 miles. That's between Newbridge Road, Route 106 on the east, and Charlotte Avenue on the west. When cars and trucks come from the west, they come from Charlotte Avenue, there's a slight curve. When they come from the town parking garage on the east heading west, there's a slight curve once they get past the bank building and some other buildings. Once they pass those curves, there is a straightaway there with no traffic control devices, and I'm telling you, it is literally a speedway right there. We are seeing cars and trucks and motorcycles every day at 30, 40, and 50 miles an hour in that stretch.
Actually, I pulled over a couple weeks ago to make a phone call, and a truck went by and my car shook like no tomorrow. So I agree with you.
Okay, so you've been there?
Yeah.
Okay. That's a nice segue. Thank you to my couple of my next points. Not too long ago, a small sign was put up on one of the utility poles on the east end of Duffy Avenue, which says, "Your speed," and it monitors your speed. Now, it is really small. It's very hard to see until you're right on top of it, and it would help if it was a little bigger. It would help if there was a sign that said, "Speed limit 30, your speed," and then display it. The way it is now, we appreciate the effort of whoever put that in. I don't know who it was. If you folks had anything to do with it, we appreciate it. But it's hardly a deterrent the way it is now. It could be more effective. And there's little, if any, police presence in the area. I have called the 2nd Precinct. It's been a while. They tried to help. They made a token gesture, and we really haven't seen any police presence in the area. I'd also like to talk about the overall condition of Duffy Avenue. The road surface is terrible. It's uneven. There are raised, I'll call them berms for lack of a better term. The road has buckled, and it's actually raised up in numerous places. There are potholes. The town, a few years ago, actually came in and did a pretty decent repair job in some of the worst spots on Duffy. It actually was a little better. It has really deteriorated in the last 2 years or so, and it's very bad. My house is one house in off Duffy. As part of my job, I work from home a lot. The amount of traffic, truck traffic that goes up and down Duffy Avenue, during the day, there are so many trucks that hit these berms that I'm telling you, it sounds like explosions. It really does. And it sounds like these trucks are about to come in our front doors.
And they're cutting between the expressway and 107.
Yeah, there's a lot of people bypassing Old Country Road.
Yep.
For sure, yeah.
Or coming up all the way up 107 to the expressway.
Yeah, well, they come off the Wanto Parkway.
Yep.
You know, and...
But the trucks I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a bad situation. Other than Councilman McInerney, I don't think any of you are that familiar with the area. No one on the town board, to my knowledge, lives in Hicksville, so you probably...
I'm there all the time.
Okay. So I welcome any and all of you to come over. Just take a ride down Duffy at 30 miles an hour. Please do the speed limit at 30. And experience for yourself how horrendous the road surface is. And I invite you to my home at any time during the day. We can stand out in the front yard and you can hear these trucks hitting these berms. Unfortunately for us, and for about a dozen of my neighbors, within about 3 or 4 blocks, there are several of these spots where the road surface is raised up, and it's horrendous. Once you hear this a few times, you'll appreciate what our request is. And just let us know what we need to do to get Duffy resurfaced, and also to try and address the safety issues. I'm concerned. It's a one-lane road in each direction, and with the excessive speed of the vehicles and the amount of people who walk their dogs and bike and drive, I'm just afraid we're heading for a tragedy. If there's anything you can do to put up some traffic control signs, increase police presence, anything you can do, we appreciate it as residents.
I didn't want to interrupt your flow while you were speaking, but I did want to let you know I'm very, very familiar with Duffy Avenue as well, and in fact, it was my office that got the sign posted together with Officer Matt McCartan, who I think was here. He did leave. So we'd had a call. I'm looking. It was August 19th. We worked with his office. This is last year. And I'm sorry that the police presence hasn't been stepped up the way that you hoped it would be. We will definitely redouble our efforts. I'm sure the supervisor will put his oomph behind it, and I'm sure we can get some things done. But I just wanted you to know, you have people up here who spend a lot of time in Hicksville. Hicksville is on everybody's minds recently, particularly with the exciting changes that are coming, and we're going to work on this for you immediately.
Thank you. I'm a 50-year resident of Hicksville, 35 years in the home I'm in. Where is your office?
My office is up here in Town Hall.
Well, you said you said as part of your responsibility.
Yes, yes, my office
okay.
in Town Hall had worked together with Police Officer McCartan to get that sign put up.
Well, if you've been down Duffy Avenue, you know there's been a little bit of a rejuvenation going on. It's taken a very long time, but it's a lot more pleasant place than it used to be. So we're trying to keep it that way and address the safety and quality of life
Can I ask
issues.
you one question? We had discussed at the time, I think, redirecting the route of traffic down Charlotte rather than, do you think that a change of direction would make a difference, or is that going to make things worse?
Well, Duffy bisects Charlotte, so I'm not sure how we'll divert traffic from one to the other.
No, I think we were looking to maybe make it that you would be forced to make a turn when you hit that intersection. Right, a no through traffic.
Yeah,
Truck traffic, exactly.
only local deliveries.
That was one of the things we had been contemplating at the time.
We would love that.
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know if the people on Charlotte would love it, so we kind of have to.
People are using, like I said, using it as a cut through.
Yeah.
That would be phenomenal, but I will tell you that in spite of the improvements in the character of the area, there's still a lot of truck traffic on Duffy for local
I know.
trucks.
I know there is.
We have Nassau Candy has moved in recently. They're a good neighbor, but there's a lot of trucks. There's trucks coming to pick up dumpsters. Those are the type that when they hit those berms and you have all that stuff
Very heavy.
shaking, horrendous.
Sure.
But hey, feel free to make it local deliveries only. We'd love that.
Okay, before you sit down, Commissioner McCaffrey, would you please step up here? We've heard this issue. It's very obvious of the problem that's going on there with the speed as well as the road resurfacing, and we'll get Commissioner of DPW and Highway, our Deputy Commissioner, involved in that. But I would like a letter prepared tomorrow to go to the commanding officer of the precinct as well as to the police commissioner, so we're making them both aware so that we can ask for a larger sign, stepped up enforcement, more patrols, not one, but all of these items. I'd like the letter on my desk tomorrow. Please get Mr. Stanton's cell phone number so we can contact him. We can get him a copy of that letter, and I would like to take you up on your invitation to come and visit, and we'll bring our personnel with us. Okay? Would you coordinate with the commissioner right now? Thank you, sir. Paul, I know you're chomping at the bit to add to this, and as someone who always is a tremendous advocate of Hicksville, it seems as though it's most appropriate to include you in this conversation.
Yes, good evening. Once again, Paul Molinari, 332 West Nicolai. I live in between two streets, Mayfair and Suggs Lane. I walk Duffy Avenue every day. I agree 100% with my neighbor. I've come before this board in the past to address Duffy Avenue.
Yes.
And those board members may remember because I've asked for sidewalks improvements, curb improvements, because some parts of the Duffy doesn't have sidewalks, some parts doesn't have curbs. And I've also brought it in the past, the same thing with all the truck traffic. You can't get away from the truck traffic because you have Nassau Candy, you have Diametrics, you have Verizon. You have the north part of Duffy Avenue is commercial. We did get a victory when Winter Brothers went ahead and filled in their property. They got a solid waste permit from the state, which the residents, we got them to only allow truck traffic coming down Charlotte Avenue and making the left onto Duffy into their property to dispose of sand, concrete, and whatever. So we were successful in that. Winter Brothers is now done. They've basically closed their gates. They're not taking in any more material, and that property's for sale. I've heard it's been sold, but the for sale sign is still up. Charlotte Avenue is all commercial. There's no residents going to complain there. But you can't get away from all the local deliveries. You have Stop and Shop. The tractor trailers come down, turn off Newbridge onto Duffy, which I've discussed it with the Mr. Bishop, that they can't make that turn onto Duffy. And the state does, and, you know,
Without going over the curb.
without going over curb, taking down the sign that says yield to pedestrians, which has happened on many occasions. So anything the town can do to improve the conditions on Duffy Avenue, I'm in favor of. Thank you for letting me speak.
Of course, Paul, thank you. Our next speaker is Kevin McKenna.
Kevin McKenna, 3 Edna Drive, Syosset, New York. Today I was here to review, I just happened to pick this up today, and I'm just bringing it to your attention. Might be something that you're looking at already. I came to review timesheets of a particular employee. Anyway, when I got the timesheets today, I was amazed to see that the town of Oyster Bay is still operating with handwritten timesheets that are filled in by the employee and then signed off on a piece of paper, and they're signed off not even by the commissioner of the department. It's just amazing that in today's day and age, you know, I see that you're buying software systems for this department and that department, to have probably one of the largest expenditures, payroll, being handled on a handwritten timesheet is something I think that you should really take a look at. The timesheets I'm referring to, maybe not all timesheets are handwritten. The ones that I'm talking about is the Parks Department, and it's like from the 1960s. Could save you a lot of money and maybe even save inaccuracies, let's say. The other thing I want to bring to your attention, which was brought to my attention in the early days, Mr. Supervisor, when Reclaim New York had met with you and you had agreed to adopt all their different indicators. Currently, the town of Oyster Bay, per Reclaim New York, you have not addressed 20% of the online indicators that you agreed to. You still have not put an indicator for contracts on the website. This is per Reclaim New York today. You still have not put an indicator on the website for access to information, and you still have not put an indicator on the website for financial info. So I'm just, on the behalf of the residents, urging you to try to complete what you promised Reclaim New York you were going to do. Next topic is the Ethics Board. When you came on early on, there was a lot of discussion and positive talking about the Ethics Board. And in the last 4 or 5 meetings, I have not heard one word about the Ethics Board. But the real point that I want to make to you is that today, I have some ethics complaints in, and the ethics complaints go to a Leslie Lazarus, who doesn't respond 90% of the time to any inquiries. For example, if you send in an ethics complaint, you should be able to get an acknowledgement as to whether or not it's even been received. And when I was at one of the ethics board's meetings, Steve Leventhal and the ethics people, they had agreed that the citizens deserve to know if their complaint, A, is received, and B, because not all ethics complaints, admittedly so, are not, some of them are not even for the ethics board. So a lot of them are discarded. A person who takes the time to send something in should at least know if it's something that's going to be addressed by the ethics board. That is a big problem. And I just want to point out that I find it very unusual that Leslie Lazarus, who is the gatekeeper of all ethics complaints, is on the Farmingdale Republican Committee. or was on the Farmingdale Republican Committee, and she worked for Greg Carmen. Let me just go on to my next point, and you could address this when I'm finished. The last item that I want to bring up is, well, let me before when Councilwoman Alessia had sent the letter in prior to the last meeting about her unhappiness without not being able to get responses to questions, that I guess what I'm trying to say is that the council people, your responsibility is to the public to answer questions and be our gatekeepers. And, you know, I've had instances just lately where, and it's not Councilwoman Alessia, it's another councilman, where council people cannot get answers that they're legitimately trying to get from the supervisor, from Mr. Carmen, and from the town attorney, Nocella. And I don't think that that it's right that the council people shouldn't be able to get answers when they're trying to do their job.
Thank you, Mr. McKenna. Your time is up, and we appreciate your testimony.
I'm sorry?
Your time is up, and we appreciate your testimony.
And then, and lastly,
and we will look into these things.
Lastly, you 2 meetings ago, you made a comment that you were going to be naming an inspector general. Okay, I'm told that now you are not going to be naming an inspector general.
Who told you that?
Councilman Macagnon.
That's not the case.
He's not lying to me.
Mr. McKenna, I'm answering your question. That's not the case.
Can I ask Councilman Macagnon?
Mr. McKenna?
He sent an email to you.
Supervisor, I got a memo from Deputy Supervisor saying that we're not doing it at the present time.
We are in that process. But, Mr. McKenna, I thank you.
Listen, I came here, and we're talking about an issue where you allow a Paul Molinari or people.
Mr. McKenna.
Why don't you at least finish the topic? How could a councilman tell me that he got a response from a town attorney and
Deputy Supervisor.
I'm sorry?
The Deputy Supervisor.
Gets an answer from the Deputy Supervisor, and you're contradicting your Deputy Supervisor, and you're not going to give an explanation to the public?
We will look into the things that you have brought to our attention, and I appreciate your testimony. But, sir, your time is up.
Are you going to be naming an Inspector General? Thank you.
Our next speaker is Bob Fryer.
Bob Fryer, 33 Chestnut Lane, Woodbury, New York. I'll continue along what Mr. McKenna asked, because that was the first question I was going to ask. But 2 months ago, actually, you announced that you were hiring an Inspector General. When will you be hiring that person?
We will be announcing that information to the public and the media as we go forward through this process.
So will that be in the next month, the next couple of weeks? What is the time frame? Have you been actively interviewing people?
This is the portion of the evening that is for testimony, for public
So you're not answering the question?
I'm going to answer some of this information, but we had the question and answer period earlier, and we answered all your questions. Why don't you give us say everything you'd like to state at this time?
On the day that you announced an Inspector General, that was over 2 months ago. The public has never heard anything ever since. Councilman Macagnon just said that he read a memo from your deputy supervisor that you're not doing that. So I think you should
Actually,
address...
that's not the case. The memo stated that we were not doing it that evening.
Councilman Macagnon.
This isn't that kind of a period. This is where you provide us, use your time to give us input.
Can I continue the talking? Thank you.
We'll see how it goes.
Thank you. Mr. Saladino, I understand, I remember your very first meeting as supervisor. You made a point of differentiating yourself from Mr. Venditto, that you would not be using a town car, but that you would be using your own car. My understanding is that you've got 3 drivers.
No. Mr. Fryer, I'm so glad
I'm still talking.
I'm
so
so
why
glad
don't
you brought that up. Very important issue, because you brought this up at other meetings. At the other meeting when you brought it up, my car was in the parking lot. Then you brought it up at a second meeting, and my car was in the parking lot.
So you don't have a
And
driver?
you bring this up again.
You don't go in a
Mr.
Suburban
Fryer, you bring
around
this
town?
up again this evening, obviously politically motivated. And my car...
Any questions are obviously politically motivated.
My car is in the parking lot, and I drove myself
When
here.
you go to your appearances,
We have had-
when you were at Chabad the other day, when you were at the library yesterday, when you were at all your various press conferences that you have almost daily, you drive in your own Hyundai?
First of all, the press conferences are about interacting with the public.
Sure. Mr. Councilman Macchio has something to say.
Deputy Supervisor said they're going over a list of qualifications for Nassau County Civil Service.
Thank you.
Okay. We're in the process.
So when you go about town
Okay.
business,
So
you,
let me
you
explain.
don't get driven.
Let me explain. I understand your political motivations, but let
It's
me
always
explain.
political motivation.
Well, quite frankly, this isn't about protecting the taxpayers, and it's not protecting a
because I think you're
process.
spending actually more money by having these
not.
drivers
We happen
than you
to-
did with Supervisor former Supervisor
that's
Venditto
not correct.
with his Crown Victoria.
It's divisive, and it's obviously motivated by your particular motivations, and we know exactly what they are. The reality is...
You think you know what they are.
I drive myself. At times, when I am working while we're driving with someone else, that enables me to continue to return phone calls, to read briefs, and to continue to work in a very efficient manner.
So do you, when you go to events, do you drive there by yourself all the time, or are you driven in a town-owned car?
All of the above.
Just answer the question.
I just did twice, but that's not good enough for you, sir. Because
did answer the
obviously,
question.
it doesn't work for your political agenda.
Right, okay.
My
Can you,
car, no, this is important.
So you...
My car is in the parking lot. I drove
Right, you
myself
drove here to work.
And I will be driving myself home this evening.
Right.
The last time
That
you
was not
brought
what I
this
was
up-
asking.
The last time you brought this up, I had driven myself here, and my car was in the parking lot, as you asked that same question.
That was not my question.
And I
That
answered
was
your
not my question.
We
So
create
Greg
efficiencies.
Mangino, Scott Pfeiffer, who are they? What do they do for
We
you?
create an efficient government.
What do they do for
and
you?
I work 24/7, 7 days a week. And there are times when it is most efficient for me to be going over a brief, returning phone calls, and efficiently carrying out the people's business. Sir, 2 things. One, I'm very glad to have answered your question.
Did not answer
and
my question.
secondly, your time is up.
I just also want to bring up a point about Mr. Nevin. You made a point of saying he was not taking medical benefits, and that the town was saving money because of that, and that he didn't need medical benefits, and his salary was $163,000, which money was used from the sort department. But you didn't say that Mr. Nevin is being paid the opt-out health insurance, so an additional $66,000, so his actual salary is $169,000 is what he's making. But I'll get to more, but you did not answer the question. Let's be very clear about that.
That's your
Because we
opinion,
all
and
see you driving, we all see
thank
you, and I have pictures of you getting into these town cars, not town. So,
I'm working 7 days a week for the people.
7 days, 24/7,
I
huh?
thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it.
Testimony, it
We
was question.
understand your political motivation, but so thank you for being here
We
this
understand
evening.
yours as well, sir.
James Versacki.
Good evening, everyone. James Versacki from Seacliff. I'm following up on what Arthur had brought up before. I believe Lou made the meeting that we had up in the North Shore area. I believe many of you know that we have a private water company that services our area, and we have received over a 60% increase in our water bills. It is catastrophic to many of us in the community. Our older residents are facing bills for water that are just astronomical. We've been collecting them. I wanted to thank Councilman Hand. You mentioned trying to support some of the litigation that the community is raising. What would be helpful to us as a community, as we do try to engage in litigation, is have support from electeds. We have been in communication with the Senator Marcelino's office and other electeds, and they have been very supportive trying to come up with some legislative relief, because obviously this is the PSC that sets the rates because it is a private water company. I'm sorry, Mr. Rose mentioned maybe doing a friend of the court brief, an amicus brief. Litigation is being commenced. There is a connected water district. Arthur, just to clarify, our water districts are connected down with parts of Lynbrook and Merrick on the South Shore, but they have somewhat different issues to deal with, but we have one public service order commission that we're challenging. It would be very helpful if we could have a liaison from our community to deal with in the town. I don't know if that's a board member or somebody in litigation office. I have volunteered to help in the community as a lawyer, so if you could let me know who to deal with, that would be very helpful. So I don't know if I could deal with that because the litigation is commencing this week.
We'll reach out to you with that information, and we thank you for bringing this up tonight, and we will continue to be very supportive on this state issue.
No, I appreciate it. The other issue I just wanted to ask is on the process for submitting public comments in writing. Is there, I know there were some comments submitted tonight for the hearing on the drones. Do we send them into your office, Mr. Saladino, or do we send them to Mr. Altadonna?
Mr. Altadonna.
Okay. Generally, is the process for the board to read in those letters into the hearings?
Yes. Mr. Altadonna, would you like to answer that question, as that is your responsibility?
I think what James is getting at is that he had submitted, I guess, something at the last meeting, and I had submitted it to the board, and it was put in the record but not read into the record. So it is a part of the record, but it was not read into the record.
Well, and I couldn't clarify that because obviously it was the August special meeting on what tonight is Resolution 596 on the apprenticeship regulations. I took the time to write something. You may not know this, I draft these types of laws around the country. So I couldn't tell if it was a part of the record or not, and I was a little surprised that everybody else's comments were read and mine weren't. And I'm a citizen of this town, and whether it doesn't matter what it is, if I take the time to put something in on an interest that I deal with, I would hope that it wasn't intentionally not read into the record. And I'd like that assurance.
No, James, you were mentioned in the minutes.
Yes,
I
I was.
And
Okay.
it was part of the record. It was just not read into the record.
Okay.
But it is part of the record.
Excuse me. We'll have order. Thank you.
Well, I'd appreciate that. No, it doesn't matter what politics are or anything else when citizens
And
are
I
involved
assume
in
you're
issues.
100% in support of our legislation.
What are we doing? I'm just trying to put a comment in. Of course, I'm supportive of it. I wrote supportive comments, but they weren't read into the record. So when I went to review the video, I wasn't sure if they were ignored or if they were part of the official record.
James,
I've
it was
testified in these things.
part of
I'm
the
just like, I've
official
testified for 20 years in public hearings, so I know how they generally work. And there was no way for me, as an attorney who's pretty sophisticated in these areas, to understand whether my comments were made a part of the record. So what should be done for one should be done for all. Okay? And as to the water issue, it's more important. I need to know who to deal with that I can give a card to work with in the office. So I don't know if
Why don't you start off by giving a card to Mr. Rosea this evening?
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
James,
Have a good
and
night.
thank you for your professionalism and